This is Dan Mumm. This video is the first in a new series of videos where I'll be showing you how to play excerpts or patterns taken from my original songs and use those patterns to demonstrate some related concepts. Today, we'll be working through a G Sharp half diminished sweep arpeggio taken from the intro to my song, The Transience of Permanence. Then we're going to go over the sweep arpeggio that it's based on and extend it from 5 strings to 6, 7, and all the way up to 8 strings. If you only have a 6-string guitar at your disposal, don't worry. Everything I'll be showing you here today is applicable to the 6-string guitar. We'll also be going over some basic theory in this video. If you're unfamiliar with intervals, triads, and chord structure, I'd recommend taking a little bit of time to familiarize yourself with those concepts before going through this lesson. It's a lot simpler than it may sound at first. Basically, if you know how to measure something with a ruler, you can easily understand intervals. And if you understand intervals, you're 90% of the way to understanding triads and chord structure. To get the full tabs for this video lesson, follow the link in the description. You'll need to enter your email address where you'll be sent an instant download link within a few minutes. Stick around for my weekly newsletter, where you'll get tips, tabs, and more lessons like this one, or just unsubscribe at any time. This headless 8-string is the Legator Ghost G8 FX with the Galaxy color scheme. The first 6 strings are tuned exactly like a 6-string guitar in standard tuning. The 7th and 8th strings are then tuned to standard as well. So the 7th string is a B, and the 8th string is an F sharp. This means that every pair of adjacent strings is tuned a 4th interval apart, except for the 2nd and 3rd strings, which, as per standard tuning, are tuned 1/2 step closer together, or rather a major third. I refer to this change in standard tuning on the guitar as the 2nd and 3rd string tuning boundary. This will become relevant a little bit later on. E and B is a perfect 4th interval. Then B and G is a major third. G and D is another 4th. Every other pair of adjacent strings is a perfect 4th. Let's start by looking at the G Sharp half diminished arpeggio as it's played in the intro to my song, The Transience of Permanence. The arpeggio pattern that this pattern is based on is a G Sharp half diminished arpeggio that skips the 2nd octave of G Sharp. We have G Sharp as our root, B is our minor third, D is the flat 5th. That makes a G Sharp diminished triad. F Sharp is the minor 7. So here we have 1 octave of a G Sharp half diminished. Now, the next note, of course, would be another G Sharp, the octave of our root. But for this pattern, we're going to be skipping it. So we just move on to the B here for an octave of the minor third, and the D here for the octave of the flat 5th. So the full pattern looks like this. Now for the pattern from the song, we start by playing the G Sharp diminished triad. And when we get to the minor 7th, we begin the sequence, which descends 3 notes per note of the arpeggio. Descend 3 notes, go back to the next note, the B, descend 3 notes. Go back to the next note, here we've got our D, and descend 3 notes. Triad, descend 3 notes, descend 3 notes, descend 3 notes. Now if we just played the first note of each of those 3-note descending sections, we would just play the arpeggio. Those are the first notes only. Here it is with the sequence. Here it is without. Sequences can be used to endlessly modify, customize, and extend patterns like this. The pattern that's being sequenced is what I call the bass pattern, and that's bass spelled B-A-S-E. The bass pattern used for this segment is simply a G Sharp half diminished pattern that goes through 2 octaves of the arpeggio, except that it skips the 2nd octave of our root G Sharp. This way, you don't have to memorize each note or section separately. You can simply memorize the bass pattern and then memorize the sequence, or order of notes, that are being used to play through that bass pattern. If you're interested in learning more about sequences, bass patterns, and sequencing bass patterns, I'd recommend checking out my complete video course, The Infinite Sequencing Method. So now we're going to add in the second octave of G sharp, and then we're going to add another octave of the minor seventh, the F sharp, on the first string. Let's take a look. Note that we're hammering on the octave of the root, and we're hammering on the octave of the minor seventh. Hammering on here, hammering on here. You may be wondering about the difference between a half diminished and a diminished seventh arpeggio. Let me show you. Both the half diminished and diminished seventh start with the diminished triad. That's the root, minor third, flat fifth. The difference between them is where the seventh is. So in the half diminished, we're just playing a standard minor seventh. This is the same seventh you'd find in a standard seventh chord, like a C7 or an E minor 7. It's just a minor seventh interval. Now, for the diminished seventh, we actually play a double flatted seventh. So that's a flatted minor seventh. So here's our minor seventh, that's F sharp. If instead we played an F, this would be a double flatted seventh. And we'd get, if we continued that up through the rest of the pattern, you'd have, you'll notice that we're also lowering the seventh here. So here was our minor seventh. Here's our double flatted seventh for the diminished seventh arpeggio. Of course, we're not working on that one today, but now you know the difference between a half diminished and a diminished seventh. Another thing of interest with this G sharp half diminished arpeggio shape is that when we remove that second octave of G sharp, we're effectively playing a standard B minor 5-string sweep arpeggio pattern with a G sharp added to it as the root. If you've already gone through my course, Sweep Picking Mastery, then you'll know that we can break down all sweep arpeggio patterns into 3 types, and I call this type the V2 pattern. Okay, so the V2 B minor 5-string sweep arpeggio pattern looks like this. This is made up of just 2 triads of B minor stacked on top of each other in order. We've got the root. In this case, B is our root. D is now a minor third of B. And then F sharp is the perfect fifth of B. So we've got B, D, F sharp, B, D, F sharp. But if we were to play G sharp as our root, if we add that here, this now becomes 1, our root, G sharp. B is a minor third of G sharp. And then if you look here, D is now a flat fifth of G sharp. Of course, F sharp is a minor seventh of G sharp. Should recognize that pattern as a minor seventh. And we can hammer on the G sharp here for the octave of the root. B again is now our minor third. It's a different looking shape because we've crossed the second, third string tuning boundary. And then, of course, we have our flat fifth here and minor seventh. Interestingly, the G sharp half diminished arpeggio is an N harmonic equivalent to a B minor add major sixth arpeggio. All you need to know for this video is that an N harmonic equivalent can refer to a note, interval, or chord that uses the same pitch or pitches as another note, interval, or chord, with the only difference being what they're called. A simple example would be a G sharp and an A flat. Now that's 2 different names, but they both refer to the same pitch. Okay, so we know that G is here, A is here. G sharp is 1/2 step higher than G. A flat is 1/2 step lower than A. So this is G sharp, and this is A flat. So it's the same note, same pitch, but it's named differently. G sharp, A flat. Now this is necessary because of how keys work, but not something you need to worry about right now. When discussing equivalent chords or arpeggios, the difference is more noticeably important. In the case of a G sharp half diminished and a B minor add major sixth, The difference is based on the tonal center, or what we naturally want to compare the harmonies to. In other words, what do you recognize as the root note, and then what do you compare the other notes to? Well, both of these arpeggios use a B, D, F sharp, and G sharp. If it's a G sharp half diminished, then G sharp is the root. In that context, B is compared to the G sharp, and that interval is a minor third. D is a flat fifth in this context, and F sharp is a minor seventh. On the other hand, if B is the root, B and D is a minor third. B and F sharp is a perfect fifth, and B and G sharp is a major sixth. To see how this is more than just semantics, you could play a B minor arpeggio over a bass guitar line that's vamping on a G sharp. The notes of the B minor arpeggio are all compared to the G sharp, and so their harmonic context changes. Now we hear G sharp as the root, the B as the minor third, and so forth. The opposite would be true when playing a G sharp diminished arpeggio over a bass line vamping on a B note, or even a piano playing a B minor chord. This is a real difference that completely changes the sound and feel of that harmony. If you think of these in terms of soloing over a chord progression, you can understand how the notes of the arpeggio you're playing harmonize with the chords you're playing over. Every note you play while improvising over a chord is compared to that chord, and when those notes fall outside of the chord, they briefly increase the harmonic complexity of that chord. Playing a lower note than the lowest note of a chord you're maybe improvising over can even change what people hear as the root note, and thus it changes the perceived chord. So it's pretty interesting how you can change an arpeggio based on just changing the root. So like with the B minor here, if we add the G sharp as a new root, we can play the exact same pattern, and now we hear it as a half diminished. In the same way, we could play, instead of a G sharp, we could play a G, and we'd have a G major 7. This is just like if you had a bass going, and then you were playing a B minor over it. Or for the G sharp, or a B, get the idea? Now you can look at this here for the G sharp. There's with the octaves of G sharp. For the octaves of G and G major 7. But it works just by playing the one G and then playing a B minor arpeggio. You get the idea? You can do a lot of cool things with that. The fact that a seventh chord can be thought of as encompassing two triads, well, this can be taken advantage of in a number of ways. In this case, we're simply adding a new root note to the bottom of a pattern you likely already know, making it much easier to learn and master. But it's also useful for finding where different arpeggios might fit into a key or chord progression. A minor key doesn't contain a major sixth of the root, so our G sharp is an accidental, or rather, it's a sharp note that's stepping outside of the key. The major sixth isn't found in either the natural or harmonic minor scales. It is, however, found in the melodic minor scale. So while it's a bit more difficult to work with, you can imagine just how effective this would be when working in neoclassical or even fusion styles. Trying to figure out what chords or arpeggios work within something like a melodic minor scale becomes a lot easier when you understand this idea. For the following 4 exercises, we'll be working with straight arpeggios only. Another way we could look at this is that we're simply expanding or extending the bass pattern used for exercise 1. While the bass pattern we used in exercise 1 only uses 1 octave of G sharp as the root note, here are 2 more octaves of G sharp that you can get to pretty easily while playing this pattern. Now, of course, you can slide up to it, you could even hammer it on, or you could even tap it. Now we can extend the pattern to 6 strings. So here, we're adding in the 6th string. We have 2 notes. So before we started with the root, since we're playing the notes in order, we're just going down to a lower octave of the minor 7th, the F sharp. Now that's one way you could play the pattern with just that extra note added in. And then of course we have the flat 5th before that here. So you can play it with one or both. From there, we can easily extend the pattern to the 7th string. If you don't have a 7 or 8 string guitar, follow along with me anyway, as this extension can be used when playing similar patterns on higher groups of strings. Since the tuning between adjacent strings is all relative, except for the 2nd and 3rd string tuning boundary, this is easily accomplished. I'll demonstrate how that works in a moment. But first, let's look at the 7th string pattern. So of course, this is 12th fret of the 7th string, so this is a B note here. I have to make a little adjustment on the guitar, getting a little buzz or something there. But anyway, you've got the B, that's our minor 3rd, lower octave, and then we just add that on to the 6th string pattern. And of course, this gets a little bit redundant now. We're just adding, one more note or 2 more notes to the pattern, same pattern we were playing before. And if you've gone through my courses, you know I'm not a big fan of redundancy, but for the sake of this little lesson, hopefully this is going to drive the point home for you. Let's take a look real quick at how we can take this in case you don't have a 7-string guitar. This pattern here, starting with the B, then moving on to D. F sharp, of course, you recognize this as a minor triad. So we have the B, D, and F sharp. Without a G sharp, it's just a B minor triad. And then, of course, we go up here to the G sharp. Now we can just jump up an octave and play that same pattern here. So if you don't have a 7-string guitar, that's one way you can use this pattern. Of course, we could just find another B, like right here, and play the pattern here, starting on the 6th string. Now for the rest of the pattern, we'd have to adjust for the 2nd, 3rd string tuning boundary. So if we were to be playing it here, starting on the 6th string, and we need to make that adjustment for the 2nd, 3rd string tuning boundary, we'll be switching hand positions to make that easy on us. Take a look. I'm switching to my 1st finger here, using a rolling bar. We hammer on here. It's the same pattern as this here. We're just simply moving it to where we're playing the whole thing on the 6 strings without the 7th string, and then making that adjustment for the 2nd, 3rd string tuning boundary. And now we'll extend the pattern to a full 8-string sweep arpeggio that, save for the last note we're sliding to, fits into a single position. Just as before, I'll show you how you can apply this to your 6-string guitar after we go through the complete 8-string pattern. Of course, we're just adding one more note. We're adding the G sharp on the 8th string on the 14th fret. That's it. So now this is now the lowest octave of our root. If you only have a 6-string guitar, we can play the same pattern on 6 strings, by going up an octave here. This is on the 16th fret of the 6th string. Now, of course, we have the 2nd, 3rd string tuning boundary, so we need to adjust that by 1/2 step. See, here we've got. In this case, we've got the root, G sharp. We've got the minor 3rd. We've got the flat 5th. And then the minor 7th. Let's see, root, minor 3rd, flat 5th, minor 7th. Root, minor 3rd. Of course, remember now, we've got the 2nd, 3rd string tuning boundary, so we adjust that by 1/2 step. We've got the flat 5th, minor 7th, and the highest octave, G sharp. If we were to take that here, you've got the root, so be on the 6th string version, playing up an octave. We've got the root here, we've got the minor 3rd, we've got the perfect 5th, we've got the minor 7th, and we start over again at the octave of the root, G sharp, go up to the minor 3rd again, and we make that adjustment, right, for the 2nd, 3rd string. 1, 3, 5, and then we've got the minor 7th. And there's the octave of our root again. Same one we were sliding to before. Because this pattern is now 2 strings shorter, so we're starting a full octave higher. Except for the first pattern, every pattern we've gone over in this lesson plays through all the notes of the arpeggio in order, without skipping any. While these patterns can be used as they are, we can also see them as bass patterns, or rather as a set of notes that we can work within, kind of like a scale. When actually playing through a pattern within the context of a solo or composition, there are numerous reasons why you may not want to play all of the notes of an arpeggio in the order of the arpeggio. Doing so is in itself a specific effect that doesn't always lend itself to musicality. You can use sequences of various levels of complexity, or just simply reorder the notes of an arpeggio to suit the specific harmonic effect or expression you're going for. Using a motif or other abstract pattern to express notes from the arpeggio is another way to utilize a bass arpeggio pattern. On the other hand, if you want the effect of playing through a long sweep pattern over an extended range, playing an arpeggio in order might be just what you need. When using a complex arpeggio, such as our G sharp half diminished, you actually have even more options. For the last exercise here, we'll go over a simple way to modify a pattern like this by simply removing notes. If you remember from exercise 1, in the bass pattern, we omitted the 2nd octave of G sharp. So on that string, we just played the minor 7th, or F sharp. In any arpeggio that contains at least one added note, such as a 7th, sweep patterns running through all of the notes in multiple octaves will result in instances of 2 or more notes falling on a single string in one position. And we've seen several examples of that in this lesson. When playing in one position, these notes will almost always be hammered on or pulled off. Based on what best suits the part you're working on, you can choose to play all of those notes if you want, or skip some of them to get new patterns. And this can be useful for melodic, harmonic, or even rhythmic reasons. This allows you to maintain a sweep pattern played in order of lowest to highest, or highest to lowest in reverse, without having to skip strings, while giving you more variety and options for the structure of the expression of that arpeggio. For example, if you need to fit a specific pattern into a specific amount of time, say you need to play through an arpeggio as 16th triplets covering 2 beats, or the space of 2 quarter notes. You need to have 12 notes in that case, 12 16th triplets. If the arpeggio pattern has 13 notes in it, then you can just omit one of those extra notes, and this way you don't end up skipping a string, and you can still play through from lowest to highest or in reverse order. Obviously, this has an effect both melodic and harmonically, so there's a lot that you can do with that as well. It can also be useful when you need to set yourself up for a certain fingering or transition. So we've got the root, we've got the minor third, we're skipping up to the minor seventh now. Sounds familiar. Okay, so we've got the root, minor third, we've got the minor seventh. Then we go up to the octave of the root. We're going to skip again, and we're going to play the flat fifth. And then we're going to skip up now to the octave of the root again. All right, and then we have, let's see, we've got the minor third and the flat fifth. And with that, we come to the end of this mini lesson. Remember that you can get the full tabs for free by following the link in the description. If you're relatively new to sweep arpeggios or sweep picking technique in general, or if you feel you have some gaps in your understanding of how sweep picking and sweep arpeggios work, I highly recommend checking out my comprehensive course, Sweep Picking Mastery. In Sweep Picking Mastery, I show you how all sweep arpeggio patterns can be broken down into 3 types. And those are based on 3 simple and common patterns that relate to patterns that most guitarists already know. In the case of the pattern we use today, it was based on a pattern I call the V2 pattern. And the V2 pattern is based on something no more complicated than the open position C chord you probably learned in your first month of playing the guitar. From there, I show you how arpeggios can easily be changed between major, minor, and diminished, and how you can add notes such as sevenths or ninths to play more complex arpeggios. It goes all the way up from basic 3-string patterns through advanced multi-position complex arpeggios on 6 strings using slides, hammer-ons, pull-offs, or even tapped notes. Well, that's it for today. See you next time.